Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Wales of Wall Street. We have an XRP Ripple video for you guys today. Before going into this one, don't forget, of course, if you haven't done so already, to smash that subscribe button. Welcome to the channel if you're new, and welcome back if you've been with us for some time. Got some exciting videos coming up as a recording. The great interview of Andre Kosterman later on this evening. Make sure you check that one out when you can. Very fascinating topics around trade finance, XTC in particular as well, and trade tech, and many, many more exciting topics around those areas. So let's go straight into this one, guys. This is very much topical around two factors that have been occurring in the last week of XRP. Of course, we couldn't go any further without talking about, again, the SEC and their relation to Ripple. Of course, the lawsuits that were ongoing for a long time came into a result around about a month or so ago now. It's crazy to think how quick that time has gone. And of course, more recently, there was a counteraction from the SEC towards Ripple. And this is all related all the way back for many years ago in relation to the offering that Ripple had to investors of a security token. Of course, more recently, that has been essentially reversed in terms of its accusation, and Ripple essentially won that battle. And I always said, even in that video that we did covering that when it first happened, was that it's not out of reach just yet. It's not completely finished. There will be some back and forth for sure. The SEC is very embarrassed about this situation, as is probably the framework aspect of the US government in terms of its finances. And at the end of the day, the SEC is trying to do this job that's kind of like the intermediary, if you like, of the government and financial assets and things that are out there, particularly in the securities element. So it's understandable why this kind of happened, but at the same time, everyone's like, look, come on, guys, like the rest of the world has no issue with the XRP token, indeed how it was distributed even at that time. And it's, of course, coming back into fruition of a conversation right now, as that case essentially was they're trying to counter it and reverse it back into the favor of the SEC, which I very much doubt will happen. But again, in my opinion, it's just a tactic and delaying the inevitable. The XRP Ripple will continue. And we saw even back in May, we covered that interesting news about the development of the acquisition from Ripple's perspective in relation to Metaco. But more recently, literally in the last few days, Ripple has acquired crypto-focused chartered trust company Fortress Trust. This is heavily related to compliance operations and financial infrastructures, etc. The frameworks is obviously very important across the world. But what's really interesting is the timing of this, in my opinion, because as we know, regulation is a big topic in the cryptocurrency sphere, as it is with any of the financial frameworks that are going through right now, whether it's the RTGS system, the central bank digital currencies, etc. And there's just a race really to get laws passed and regulation through as well, through that door. And we know that here in the UK, there's been some exciting developments in the abilities for digital cryptocurrencies and digital currencies in general to be used as general currencies and actual terminology of finance here in the UK. I was passed through the King's Assent a couple of months ago and passed by law, which goes active, I believe, this month at some point, along with the digitalization of trade finance as well. But the rest of the world is following suit, guys. The Americans over with their governments are working heavily in the background for finalizing regulatory frameworks and passing those out to their organizations that regulate and govern these areas of interest throughout finance, of course. So we've got these companies now, like Ripple, now purchasing and obtaining companies that are heavily orientated around compliance, around privacy, security, data management, all of these things, because we know that in the next couple of years, the entirety of the space is going to evolve significantly. It's very exciting. Some bits are scary for sure, but in reality, from when we're looking at our investments and we look to the future and what we're actually investing in, well, XRP Ripple always ticked the box in my mind as to what it was capable of doing. The partnerships speak for themselves, but certainly these integration partnerships is what I kind of probably called this one, simply because you can imagine and anticipate that because Ripple is going to be orientating so much financial ability around the world, especially with the interbanking systems on an international scale as well, these kind of things are really important to have in the back end. And instead of getting loads of resource and managing this yourself, you can just acquire a company that's already been doing this, already has the networking ability, the integrations that are already in place across the world to do so. So a bit more on this topic. I'm not going to read word for word here, but it's very interesting. So blockchain firm Ripple has acquired Fortress Trust, a Nevada-based chartered trust company with crypto and Web3 focus. Financial terms of the acquisition are not disclosed, so a lot of people are saying there's less or a lot less than the $250 million that they paid for Metaco in May. But this is quite interesting. So it adds Nevada to Ripple's list of regulatory licenses, which includes New York bit license and money transmitter licenses in 30 US states. So it's covering that US aspect. It's almost really interesting to see this as well, from the fact that we've got this SEC lawsuit continuing back and forth. But when you're acquiring things like this and you're enhancing your ability to become more trustworthy, as it were, at that top level, even though Ripple is already, to be honest, it kind of ticks another box to actually turn around and go, well, hang on a minute, we're doing this and we've got these kind of acquisitions and these integrations. So what more can you possibly come to us for? So it's a really good move, in my opinion, for Ripple. It's obviously been going for a long time. It hasn't just clicked their fingers and thought, oh, sorry, we're just going to buy these guys, next week. Of course, it's been an ongoing conversation for some time. And we know here, and particularly it's mentioned here as well, is that Ripple was a partial investor of Fortress Trust over a year or so ago anyway. So you can imagine those conversations have been going on for some time. But as I said, it's really interesting, the timing from the SEC aspect. But also, a lot of people don't recognize at the moment that there's a whole entire framework, systematic approach going on around the world right now, both for tax transparencies, the frameworks in general, for the utilization of digital wallets, cryptocurrencies in general. So we've got our individual, regional and country management frameworks and regulations going through, but an actual whole entire world framework has been going on for some time. I'll leave the links to these two documents at the end of this video in the description. But CARF is quite interesting. This is all relating back to this crypto asset reporting frameworks. When we're talking about, security offerings, or if we're going to use cryptocurrency, how are we going to tax this? How are we going to track and trace this, but also not deter from the fact that we need to be very apparent around transparency, the privacy, the data, all of these things. And more recently, of course, with this G20 movement here, and several countries obviously involved in this, leaders of the 20 biggest economies in the world, collectively known as G20, are pushing for a speedy implementation of cross-border framework for crypto assets. So this is out from New Delhi quite recently, the facilitation to build this framework and have it integrated fully at 2027. So this leads on from that 2025 RTGS system framework being switched on, and you've got that kind of 1 to 5 year gap now of really pushing it through. And ultimately, in my opinion, yes, they say that cash will still work side by side. I have no doubt in my mind that over a 5-10 year period that will be completely phased out. But all these countries that are listed, and they're working on this. The crypto asset reporting framework was first introduced in October 2022. So I'm not saying that it's very heavily related, but obviously a similar time to Ripple's investment into Fortress Trust. And this was around the economic cooperation and development. The document is designed to give tax authorities greater visibility into cryptocurrency transactions, as well as the individuals behind them. So this is what I mean, is it's not heavily involved Fortress Trust in terms of the tax side of things, albeit it can do that for sure when we're looking at KYC and all these aspects as well, fraud mitigation, so that could be money laundering and things like that as well. But all of these things, securities, deeds, real estate, payments, regulatory security, accounts, IRAs, it's, in my opinion, just very coincidental that all of this is pulling together as these lawsuits continue back and forth. As I said, the frameworks are being built, and it's like this is where we start defining the real true cryptocurrency frameworks and blockchain technologies out there. In my opinion, there are thousands upon thousands of assets out there. Some are meme coins, some are utility tokens, and they will still survive for sure in their own capacities and their own reasonings. But for the financial world, which is where I'm very heavily focused within my portfolio, and for those that want to know my portfolio, or at least a breakdown of the assets that I hold, I will get a video out in the next day or two, which is just halfway through recording, around all the things that I hold. And you'll find, particularly in my portfolio, I'm heavily interested in proper usage and proper technology, and Ripple XRP is one of those. And I think this is very interesting timing for all these movements, and why XRP Ripple has probably gone down this route of obtaining and acquiring this kind of company, of what it's available to do in the space, and particularly as we go into this next phase of evolution in blockchain. So there's a few topics there, guys. I thought it was quite interesting. There has been a huge impact massively in the chart, which we'll just jump into now actually on that point. So if I just get that over here, so we're currently trading around 48 cents, and this is a good, interesting bite point for me personally. It's one that's matching all the way back here from July, and there's a few alterations around the last 6 months around this particular area. Pretty much really something that's been matching ever since around the October 2022 mark. So we're coming up to that year anniversary already, and you can see across the board there's a lot of arguably minimalistic volatility in short periods of time around this kind of price point area. Now, we obviously had the security offering announcement from the SEC's perspective of the lawsuit news, which shot it all the way up to 90 odd cents. I didn't take too much advantage of that. I'm a long-term holder of XRP. I just wanted to hold that in management. It was too crazy in some aspects for me, but I know a lot of people probably made good money, maybe even broke even on some of their instances of their accumulation across this few years period of time. If you remember correctly, back here, back in April 2021 was one of the biggest high points in this area, of course, and then we got to that December moment, and of course the traction downwards since then, since that lawsuit began. So it's had a really interesting ride thus far. Hitting those higher points and coming back down to those reflective points. But if we look back at the proper history here, around this 50 cent mark, this is why I'm so interested in accumulating at this area. Yes, I was buying XRP back in 2020, even at around 12 cents or 18 cents, which is fantastic. But we've moved on since then. It's had evolution, more confidence, more awareness, more accumulators, more wallet holders, all of these things. But look at this pattern. When we actually look at the resistance in these areas are now trying to become support areas, and the only time we went across that mark properly was the more recent time with that big announcement in July. It couldn't sustain and it's back down here. So yes, of course there's opportunity for lower regions, potentially at that lower 40 cent mark, maybe potentially just a couple more times dropping down into that 35 to 38 cent mark. But again, that's where DCA comes into fruition of conversation. I'm just going to move these fib levels up slightly, hopefully I keep them fairly accurate just so we can see these movements as well. But you can see clearly that this area is great interest. As I said, it could potentially be bouncing still back down to those 45 cent marks, or even lower to test the 38 cent marks at some point. We will draw those in momentarily here and here, but you can see these three areas of interest on the way down that we were interested in the last video that we did have come into fruition. So those markers are for sure there. The performance side on the right hand side here is indicating that we've got a bit of a mixed blend here. So we're taking consideration that big move up here, which is kind of skewing these three bottom ones, the 6 month, year to date, and the year, but they're still in positive. What's more interesting for me at the moment is this sustainability perspective. Can we obtain these support lines? And this is where we see on these 1 week's, 1 month and 3 months performance indicators that is coming back into the negative spectrum, which we could kind of understand after that uptake that we saw in July. We've had a couple months since then, and it's pulling itself back down. So over time, that 6 month will probably reduce itself even nearer to 0%. We're not sure about on the year to date and the year just yet. That really depends on the next couple of months, of course. But as I said, for me personally, it's not financial advice. These price point areas are quite interesting to me personally, as we're reflecting points of data that we've seen so many times in the past, in coordination with the rest of the chart and the history of it too. So this kind of like 60 to 40 cent mark is a really interesting area of accumulation for the long term, in my opinion. Now, people always speculate how XRP can go price point wise. Of course, the last bull run was $1.96, absolutely huge. And just put that into a bit of perspective, just taking it from that sort of current price point that we're at the moment, all the way up to that previous all-time high, is a good 300% increase. But there's many people saying that once the switch-ons are complete and this lawsuit's completely out the way, arguably 2025 in that sort of bull run area, we could see $3 to $5 minimum. In the long run, people are talking about like $1,000, $5,000. Of course, potentially that has ability, but we've got to look at things like supply and how this utility token will be used. Of course, we've got to understand about fractionalization as well, is very important. If XRP is going to be used as every transaction or for every transaction around the world, Well, of course, yes, it could be used, but it could also be fractionalized. So that's where the important factors come in my opinion. But absolutely, $3 to $5 is definitely achievable in that next bull run. And to put that into perspective, could take us to a very nice, healthy 800 to 1,000% gain from its current price points that we see. So of course we look at it and go, oh, 50 cents compared to the 1 cent, 2 cent tokens out there. You've got to eradicate that out of the mind. Think about it in a different way of what XRP Ripple is about, what it's being used for, and its massive, massive future potential. There's no doubt about it. So these are kind of my thoughts and theories around this at the moment, where we are, where I think that we could get some extra bite points of XRP as accumulation opportunities. But a couple of other pointers here to just confirm these areas of interest to me. The RSI right now, 14 days, 28, and 28 days showing 38. Again, confirming to me in my head, this is a good option for accumulation for me personally. Again, not financial advice, you've got to make your own conclusions, but this is where I see an area of interest with anticipation that we might drop down slightly lower to grab those 5, potentially 10 cent savings on the XRP token price. We'll have to see how that pulls out, but it's exciting times for the future. I don't ever really pay too much attention about the theatre and the SEC stuff, because I think that's going to be out of the way at some point, and we will just fly upwards based on the performance and what the technology advancements are available to do. So guys, that wraps that video up there. Thank you so much for watching this one. We'll see you in the next XRP video. Bye bye.